Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of your Pac-12 Hoops Preview, along with the former Stanford point guard Drew Schiller, Roxy Bernstein with you as we're heading down the home stretch of Pac-12 basketball. 3 weeks left in the regular season, and we have 5 teams separated by just 1 game in the conference standings. Before we get to the race, Drew, Pac-12 Player of the Week for last week, Oregon forward E.J. Singler.
Well, last week it was Kyle Fogg, a senior, who got his first Pac-12 Player of the Week recognition. This week it's E.J. Singler, who's a junior, his first Pac-12 Player of the Week. He had a monster performance, 13 points, 8 rebounds against Washington, and then 23 points and 6 rebounds against Washington State. And he's gotten better every year. As a freshman, he averaged just 6 points a game. As a sophomore, 11.5 points a game. And now as a junior, 13.5 points per game. But we got to talk about his supporting cast as well. The big man, Carlos Emery, off of the bench. He had 16 points and 8 rebounds against Washington, and 12 points and 8 rebounds against Washington State. And then in the backcourt, Garrett Sim and DeVoe Joseph, 13 points each against Washington, and 16 points each against Washington State. So a total team effort, but spearheaded by E.J. Singler.
Well, speaking of Oregon, the Oregon Ducks are one of those 5 teams that are within 1 game of the top spot in the conference, as Cal and Washington are both 10-3 in Pac-12 play, a game in front of Oregon at 9-4 with Colorado and Arizona. As all these teams right near the top, it's making for an interesting race here as we're heading towards seeding for the Pac-12 tournament.
Well, last week we talked about Washington. It'd be a victory if they could just go on the road and get their split. And after getting thumped by Oregon on Thursday, they bounced back very nicely and got the win at Oregon State. For Cal, they went to L.A. and got a huge sweep, a very impressive performance against USC, beating them by 26 points. And then against UCLA on Saturday, Justin Cobbs was the best player on the floor. 18 points, 5 assists, completely controlled the game, made big shot after big shot, had a great pass to Allen Crabbe for a 3 that really was the dagger late in that game. And then Arizona, they took care of business by getting the sweep at home against Utah and Colorado, although that Utah one wasn't decided until late in the game, and Utah actually had a 12-point lead late in the second half. But you're absolutely right, it's going to be a very exciting race to the finish.
Well, the Pac-12 action for this week starts on Wednesday night, the crosstown rivalry in L.A. at the L.A. Sports Arena as UCLA hosts USC, a game that can be seen at 7:30 on Prime Ticket in Southern California. And then the conference really kicks it into gear on Thursday at 6 o'clock, national broadcast from Pullman, Arizona, Washington State, and the Wildcats are going to try to keep it rolling on the road.
Well, a very important game for Arizona. They cannot look past Washington State to their showdown with Washington on Saturday. Washington State is a very tough team to beat at home, evident by them sweeping the Bay Area schools a few weeks back. Nick Johnson really bailed Arizona out last Saturday against Utah. He had arguably his best game of his young career at Arizona, 18 points. 12 of those points came in the second half. So a dicey game for Arizona. It's always difficult to go up to Pullman and get that win, that road trip. You have to fly over to Seattle. Arizona cannot look past the Cougars.
Also a big game coming up Thursday night. Cal hosts Oregon at Haas Pavilion in Berkeley, 7:30 tip. A game that can be seen on Comcast Sportsnet California and Comcast Sportsnet Northwest. And the hot Oregon Ducks go on the road. Cal has had their number as of late, and the Bears back at home trying to stay in first place.
Well, this is the biggest game of Thursday night, no doubt about it. 10-3 Cal against 9-4 Oregon. In the first meeting up in Eugene, Allen Crabbe, 26 points. 23 of those points came in the second half, and Cal did a great job defensively holding Oregon to 38% shooting. This is a game that Cal can really ruin Oregon's chance of winning the regular season Pac-12 championship, because if Cal knocks off Oregon, they'll have a 2-game lead in the standings, but really 3 because they'll have swept the season series. So if Oregon wants a chance to win the regular season crown, they have to go into Haas Pavilion and beat the Bears.
Also coming up on Thursday night, Stanford at 7 o'clock hosts Oregon State. And then Arizona State is in Seattle to take on the Washington Huskies, a national broadcast on FSN with a tip at 8 o'clock. Now on to the ball games on Saturday, and it starts with a non-conference tilt. 10 a.m. Pacific time, a 1 o'clock tip at Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena. UCLA, St. John's on CBS. Intersectional matchup here, and a last chance really for the Pac-12, Drew, to get a non-conference win and help that out-of-conference RPI?
Well, UCLA will be facing their former coach, Steve Lavin, who actually won't be on the sidelines because he's still recovering from prostate cancer, but he is doing a lot better. He says he definitely will return to coaching, but he's not sure exactly when. But like you said, this is a game that UCLA must win. It's a 10 a.m. start Pacific time, so your body has to get adjusted very quickly to being out in New York City. But St. John's at 10-15 and just 4-9 in the Big East. UCLA must go on the road and get this win.
Well, certainly a huge tilt coming up at noon Pacific time on FSN, a national broadcast, as Arizona is at Washington and a huge showdown in Seattle.
Well, their first meeting in Tucson, Washington had an 11-point lead with just under 6 minutes to go, but Arizona came storming back to tie the game. They eventually fell by 2, thanks in large part to because of Tony Roten's block on Josiah Turner's layup at the buzzer that would have tied it and sent it to overtime. A huge win for Washington on the road. Whenever these two teams meet, it's going to be a very physical contest. There's no love lost when these two teams get together. But just like we talked about how Cal has a chance to ruin Oregon's dream of winning the regular season Pac-12 championship, Washington can do the same thing to Arizona, because in a worst-case scenario, even if Washington loses at home to Arizona State on Thursday and Arizona beats Washington State on Thursday and they enter that game on Saturday tied, if Washington wins, they'll be up on Arizona by 1 game in the standings, but really 2, because they'll have swept the season series. So it's a must-win for Arizona.
Also coming up on Saturday at 3 o'clock Mountain Star, 2 o'clock Pacific time, national broadcast on FSN. Colorado is at Utah. Arizona State on Root Sports Northwest takes on Washington State. And then at 7, Cal hosts Oregon State on Comcast Sportsnet California on senior night for Harper Camp and Jorge Gutierrez. And the final game of the weekend, Sunday late afternoon, a 4:30 tip at Maples Pavilion, a national broadcast on FSN, as Stanford hosts Oregon in a game the Cardinals desperately need, Drew, if they're going to stay in contention in this Pac-12 race.
Well, if Stanford wants to earn a first-round bye in the Pac-12 tournament, they got to finish in the top 4, and they're going to have to sweep the Oregon schools at home this week. In their team's first meeting in Eugene, DeVoe Joseph had a career-high 30 points for Oregon in their win. Stanford was just 8 for 25 from the three-point line. Last year, Oregon snapped a 24-game losing streak at Maples Pavilion, so they're going to look to make it 2 in a row.
Well, that's a wrap on Pac-12 basketball for this week. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty time, and all these teams separated by just 1 game. 5 teams within 1 game of the top spot in the Pac-12 conference. Along with Drew Schiller, Roxy Bernstein, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you right here next week for your next installment of Pac-12 Hoops.